You're not supposed to bet. Down guys, you guys go like top 10. I remember that talking. Hello.
So I'm in one home. I want to start with one tonight. Happiness is like a crystal, fair and exquisite and clear, broken into a million pieces, shattered, scattered, far and near. Now and then along life's pathway, lo, some shiny fragments fall, and there are so many pieces, no one ever finds them all.
Okay.
You may find a bit of beauty or an honest share of wealth, while another just beside you gathers honor, love, and health. They choose or grasp unduly, broken is the perfect ball. As there are so many pieces, no one ever finds them all. Yet the wise as on the journey treasure every fragment clear, fit them as they may together, imaging the shattered sphere. Yeah. Learning ever to be thankful, though their share of it is small, for it has so many pieces. No one ever finds them all. And may each of you feel happiness this evening as we congregate together. And I'll pass you on.
Hello, welcome. Thank you for coming to the NPA meeting. As you can see, we're working on the tech aspect of things. And if it becomes operable, we will have microphones, but if not, we ask for your patience and I just ask you to project loudly. This one. There's one person. Thank you. All right. Does that do any good?
That's great.
No, great. Okay. Thank you to everybody who worked. That was a group effort. So thanks for that. My name is Amy Lawson. I live in Ward 4. I use she, her pronouns. I'm facilitating tonight's meeting. And to start us off, let's go around and do introductions. Please tell us your name, what ward you're from, which pronouns you prefer, and then we'll shift into open forum to share what on people's minds tonight. And I'll pass the microphone around. Would you folks over there be willing to start? Sure. Okay. Would you like to go first?
Say name.
Thank you.
Ward 4. Ari White.
Steve Taubman, I live in Ward 4 also. Hank Prinsky, Ward 4.
Steve Brown, Ward 7.
Ward 7.
Oliver, Ward 7, he, him pronouns. I'm Carly, Ward 7, and she, her, I use she, her pronouns. Here.
Can you hear me? Okay. Evan Litwin, he, him pronouns, Ward 7.
Ward 7.
Lisa Alisi, Ward 2, Upper
Jim Palmer, Ward 4.
Linda Air, Ward 4.
Al Bellucci, using him, and Ward 7.
Joanne Hunt, Ward 4, Steering Wheel. Sarah Carpenter, Ward 4, her pronouns. Anna Parker, Ward 7, Martha Malton, Ward 7, her pronouns.
Sandy McCray, Ward 7, she, her pronouns.
Vicki Garrison, Ward 7, she, her pronouns, and I saw this today, so I want to try it. And I'm in perimenopause, so my pronouns are also try me. No thanks.
Ward 7, she, her pronouns. Hello, Peggy Zach, Ward 7, she, her pronouns.
Angie Grove, she, her, Ward 7.
Linda Looney, she, her, Ward 4.
Amy Velosky Branch, she, her, Ward 4.
Melville, Ward 7, he had.
Bill Bruce, Ward 4, he him pronouns. Mark Leopold, he him, Ward 4. Sequoia, Ward 4.
Kathleen Miles, Ward 4.
Robert Bristol Johnson, Ward 7. Steve Goodkind, Ward 7.
Lord. Ward 7, and we have Rover and Lucy also Ward 7.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, and welcome.
I'm also the timekeeper tonight, so you're gonna hear some chimes when we're at time.
Thank you.
I think the mic stopped running.
Mine doesn't work at all.
It did.
Work for you.
Work for you.
That's funny, because I was gonna tell everyone to put it closer to your mouth, but that's not the issue.
I think the batteries are dead.
Okay, this, still nothing?
Now it is.
Okay, because the battery's on, we'll just do our best. If folks cannot hear, please don't be shy about raising your hand, because we want to make this available to everybody. Unfortunately, along a similar vein as tech challenges, we also don't have paper printouts of the agenda tonight. We usually do, but unfortunately tonight we don't. And so I wrote it up here, but that likely is going to be difficult for folks to see from farther away. So one option is you can pull it up on your phone or a computer if you have one. It's on the Burlington City website. So if you feel like pulling it up, it's at burlingtonvt.portal.civicclerk.com. And our meeting is the third one down from the top today. And I can repeat that again if anybody needs it. All right, so we'll shift toward open forum. We are right on time, look at that. We'll shift toward open forum, and so long as the mic keeps working, please hold it close to your mouth so that your sound will be picked up. We've got about 20 minutes for folks to share announcements about things, concerns, questions, because we have potentially folks in the room who may know the answers. And just share general updates about our community that you would want folks to be aware of. Would anybody like to begin, and does anyone have an announcement? Is it Amy? Okay, and also, this is tough for us to do, but if you can say your name at the start of your announcement, that probably isn't possible. Amy Velosky Branch, I'm in Ward 4, I'm the Ward Clerk. But hopefully you've all heard, but just in case you haven't, Ward 4 is not voting at St. Mark's. We're not gonna be at St. Mark's anymore, we're gonna be at the Elks Lodge. We'll see you 2 weeks from tonight at the Elks Lodge, those of you from Ward 4, thanks.
Is that a permanent change?
Semi-permanent, yes, at least for the next, probably the next year or two, yes, sir.
Thank you, that's very timely and important.
We'll get it.
Hi, I'm Linda Looney. I'm here representing the North End Food Pantry. So I wanted to give you some updates on what's going on with us. If you've cleaned out your winter clothes and you got a pile of stuff you don't want to take all the way down to Goodwill or Resource, we are collecting. We always collect the last Sunday of the month from 9 to 11 at the Oddfellows Lodge. You just go around to the back and go up the steps. And one really nice thing that we've done, we partnered with BHF and their group that helps kids get their service time. So we've got high school kids helping us as well as adults. But if anybody wants to volunteer, send an email to the North End Food Pantry and I'll, help you out to come and volunteer. Also, if you know anybody who uses the pantry and we are letting people know or needs the pantry, starting on November 30th, that weekend, we've gotten permission from the Oddfellows and we are doing all the fresh fruits and vegetables upstairs in the lodge so that people can be inside. And we're gonna do that through March. Typically we do it outside in the winter, rain, snow, sleet, or hail, and we want people to be comfortable. So, anybody asks about where the food pantry is? Yeah.
What do we bring food if we have some extra in the garden?
You can bring it right now. You can bring it to the Heidelberg. We like to have it by 8:45 because people go through the line at 9
In the morning.
in the morning. Yeah, Saturday or Sunday, doesn't matter either day. And that would be the same thing, once we get into the lodge, you would bring it over about 8:45. And we would put it out in the distribution table. I think that's a good question. We have, an online auction starting November 1st. We have a lot of our local businesses who've been very generous to give us items to auction. We are completely volunteer. We don't get any, donations are what you guys give us, unless we run a fundraiser. So, we pretty much we get a lot of food donations. But one of the things we're always short on and they're asking for at the voting site is diapers. We go through diapers, they're expensive. People don't normally donate them, but diapers and feminine products are always really, or shampoos or soaps or those kinds of things. So that would be great if anybody wants to do that too at 8:45.
All those are disposable diapers?
Yep. Well, a lot of the customers that we have may not have access to a washing machine and a dryer. So yeah, they're all disposable. Let's see, what else would I tell you? Volunteering, we're on our website is it's northendfoodpantry.org. I'm sorry, I always say the North. It's northendfoodpantry.org. There's lots of information there about how to volunteer, how to donate. And if you want to make a monetary donation, our PO box is 3318, and that information is on the website too. One of the other things that we've done in the past, and I don't know if any of you have been involved in it, and it's going to happen in the Lakewood neighborhood this weekend, is we have neighborhood food drives. So we have a kit set up for anybody who wants to do one in their neighborhood. It could be a block, it could be 2 blocks. We don't, it doesn't have to be huge. But if somebody wants to do that, they can send us an email and say they're interested, where their neighborhood is, and we'll set you up with the information on collection. And the only thing we would need to know is, we would have it come down on a weekend or whatever, and we would make sure we'd have people or staff or somebody volunteer there to help you bring it down into the lodge. So, any questions? Again, the North End Food Pantry, northendfoodpantry.org website has a lot, and we have an email address, and we answer usually within 24 hours.
Thank you.
Thank you. Over here. Hi, I'm Angie Grove. I'm the executive director at the Ethan Allen Homestead Museum, which is in the New North End. For those of you who might not be aware, it has the Allen House, built in 1785, which is the oldest still standing property in the city of Burlington. Yay, New North End. Additionally, you may have seen in the news that we were broken into and things were stolen and there was damaged property, as well as with the Burlington Forest Preschool, who we share a building with last week. So I wanted to say thank you because a lot of community members from the New North End have reached out, have donated to help us raise funds to replace the stolen items. And so thank you very much for your support. We had a really successful harvest reenactment last weekend, and we're hosting our first annual Spooky Stories guided haunted tours this Friday. And there are a few tickets still available if you're interested in that. And then we close for the season on Halloween, but we are doing programming year round, especially with school groups, and putting in new exhibits for the 250th anniversary of the American Revolution, which starts next year. So we are always looking for volunteers. So if any of you are interested in getting involved with the preservation of the site and the cultural heritage educational programming that we do, please reach out, check our website, or talk to me after the meeting. Thank you. Other announcements or updates? Councilor Ferguson?
I want to mention, I understand the planning office had contacted the NPA about wanting to see there's, you want a presentation on the neighborhood code with zoning work that we've done for the whole last year, but there wasn't room on the agenda. So I just want to remind, if you've got questions, look on the city website or let any of your councilors know. We're trying to get you information. We passed most of it already, but we're still working on amendments.
Thank you. This, I don't know if this has happened before. Oh, thank you.
Hi, I'm
Joanne, I'm in her practitioner, so I'm just saying, if you're that and get your vaccine, COVID vaccine, please. It's all around still.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. Updates, questions, announcements? All right, we are ahead of schedule. We don't know that this is happening. So we're a bit ahead, but, the next item on the agenda is opening the floor to anybody who would like to nominate themselves or somebody else to join the steering committee. We try to make room for this at, the regular meetings, to remind folks that this is a group that is run by your neighbors and by community members. Is there anybody tonight who has, interest in nominating themselves or somebody else? Just raise your hand.
I gotta ask the person.
One more time?
2 minutes.
My name is Sammy McRae. And I'd be willing to, serve.
Yeah, I just want to talk a little bit about what it entails. Okay. Can you hear me?
No.
I don't really need a mic.
I can mostly hear you.
Okay, I don't really need a mic. I'm just pretending. The steering committee can be a lot of fun and it doesn't take a lot of time. Really, in order to have these dinners and these meetings each month, we meet the first Wednesday of the month for an hour and a half from 6 to 7:30 just to plan the agenda. And the agenda is the result of, forms that are completed on the city webpage that folks or entities in the community, they complete a form, it comes out to us. And then we try to like balance space of that. And then we just facilitate this meeting together. I always come early and say, we should clean up when we go home. And it's important to have more bring this to you. So it'd be wonderful. So again, it's like an hour and a half of first Wednesday of the month from 6 to 7:30 meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for explaining it. And then Sandy?
Sandy.
So I'm gonna put you on the spot, but would you be willing to share just a little bit about why you'd be interested in, and, people should just tiny bit of information because the next step is to vote. No pressure. Oh, yes, thank you, yes. Did you hear that?
Oh, you're taking notes?
What-
No.
Award, okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't remember if the ward is supposed to vote or if everyone's supposed to vote.
Oh, okay.
The ward.
The ward, the third ward,
Yeah, I'm Ward 7.
meaning Ward 7 residents should vote.
Okay,
right?
yeah.
I can't remember.
Okay. So anyway, I moved to Burlington, about 2 years ago from Woodstock, Vermont. And, and I just want to become, engaged in the whole community. And so that, besides Vicky's been kind of twisting me off my arm, but so, yeah, I think it might be fun.
No, I would never. And she's my neighbor. And I'm gonna see. Her garden's better than mine.
I'm Martha Walpus, I'm the Ward 7, and I also am a neighbor of Sammy's, and I have known her since she came to town. She has a history of community work. She works really well with people. She works, I've seen her work at, people with at the UU that is a breakfast that we're feeding the community with. And so she's really good with people. She has no judgment. She's very welcoming. She has caring skills. She has a very spiritual side. that helps out Laura in her behavior, you know, rather than, some of the more traditional ways. And she's just a really fun, hardworking person, so I would definitely recommend her.
Thank you.
And I don't think that.
Love, fun, and.
Magic.
Maybe for, like, us to, after that information, they might not know what's gonna be. Part of it.
Oh, oh, that's,
If that's okay. 'Cause I
Yeah.
have another nomination.
Great, sure, Councilor Whitman.
Thank you, and sorry to take over in that applicant, I'm a second resident, and amazing community member, and I want to hand. Mic over to him and see if he will accept the nomination.
I was a kitchen manager at Chili's, I was a kitchen manager at Applebee's, and then before that, I was a professional baker, pastry chef at Chuck's Steakhouse in Danbury, Connecticut. My mom was a chef, I grew up like baking, washing dishes. For James Beard, Julia Childs, Jeff Kipon, a lot of, I love just pretty much how I live, you know, makes my heart grow. I would love to help out with future dinners, and my wife Jane also, and I made the peach cake tonight.
so good.
Okay, and then in the future, even maybe we would do the dinner ourselves once in a while too, because food is really, you said it, food is love. So thank you.
Yes.
You know, like,
Yeah, regularly for many, many, many people to make sure that everybody has healthy, delicious food. And one of the things he does is he grows his own wheat and harvests it and to make the bread fresh for everybody. So you'll look forward to his amazing cooking hopefully. And thanks for stepping up to volunteer for the NPA steering committee.
Thank you for nominating somebody, thank you for accepting the nomination.
Number that you're trying to fill.
You know, I haven't been on the committee long enough to know the answer to that. I think in the past, the most we've had is 12. That's my understanding.
Cumulative between the two wards.
Yes, good question. Yes, cumulative, not 12. That would be, so maybe would be rough.
I remember thinking like 12 to 16, but to try to strive for a balance between the two wards since we are merged together, and so you don't want too many from one ward, even though we're all neighbors and we all care about each other.
The minimum is 3 people on each, from each ward on the steering committee. The maximum is 12 from each ward on the steering committee.
Wow. So,
Thank you.
and also, we embrace equity and equality in life. And so, you know, sometimes people might have more in them and want to do a little more than other times, and there's no questions asked. It's like, if you can volunteer to do something, great. If you can't, you know, figure it out. It's okay. There's nothing.
Any other nominations? So myself or or somebody else? All right, I think then it will be time to do a vote. Professor Whitman suggested doing it as a choice, so we'll. That's our. Yeah, yeah, all right, so all in favor of.
We're voting for the slate? Yes, for Ward 7. We're voting for all the six folks.
Yeah. Okay. Get myself back up there.
Let's clarify this really quick.
Can we just get a show of hands for how many people are in Ward 7? So we can know.
Well,
Nominating thing.
Why is I hearing background noise? Okay,
Was playing background.
yeah, we're,
Oh, that's sorry,
Can't do that.
muted it, that was my fault.
okay, thanks, so that's okay. I was in like the twilight zone.
I thought I was hearing.
Yeah, okay. All right, so somebody was clarifying. Where was that before the sound jumped in? We were saying a show of hands of folks from Ward 7.
I was just getting it.
That's the population,
Okay,
and so we should just vote on the slate or not.
okay, and what did we say?
I was just getting an estimation.
Okay. Okay, so we're voting for both folks, you can vote twice, but only residents of Ward 7 are able to participate in this vote. Am I missing anything? Okay, all right, as you can see, it's a community run thing. So, all in favor of accepting both nominations of Steve and Sammy, hands up.
It's happening.
Anyone opposed? I can't imagine so. All right, we've got 2 new members. Thank you, everybody, and thank you for. All right,
Anyone from Ward 4 now? We just did Ward 7, remember? So we didn't ask Ward 4 people if they would like to come on board.
anybody from Ward 4?
Sounds fun.
All right.
Yeah, I'll do it.
All right. I'm giving up on the mic. Just tell us about yourself, your name, and why you'd be promoted. Thank you.
Sure, howdy, my name is Alex. Moved in, well, I've been in Burlington for a couple of years, but my wife and I bought a house that we're hopefully gonna live in, raise our kids in, and I've kind of been a traveler and nomad for most of my 20s. So I've never had any really community beyond several months of community. And I am, since I was very young, been involved in volunteering, check, 1, 2, 1, 2. And yeah, I've gone to a couple of these and get good vibes, and I'd like to contribute. So, yeah, I can say more about myself, but yeah, I'm a hard worker and I enjoy building things.
Are you sure your last name?
Melville, like the author.
I think at this point, the microphone has become like one of those like talking sticks. But I'm not gonna get it back.
This one too.
All right, any other nominees or nominations from Ward 4? Thanks, Charlie. All right, so can we please see a show of hands of folks who live in Ward 4 and so are able to participate in this vote? All right. So all those, and put hands down, and then all those in favor of Alex Melville joining the jury. All right, any opposed? All right, welcome Alex, thank you. Yes, thank you, I think, and Councilor Carpenter.
I'm trying to enter a late nominee from Ward 4, Mark Leopold, who's very active in our neighborhood, does a lot of volunteer stuff as well, and is an engaged person, and I think he contributes greatly to the board.
Okay.
And NPA.
Mark, do you accept the nomination?
I accept.
Okay, great. Do you have anything to add to Councilor Carpenter's nomination of you?
I grew up on the north end from age 11 to now. I'm older than 11. And, it's changed a lot over the years, but I think it's a good place to live.
Great, great. All right. So then, we'll do another vote. Residents of Ward 4 in favor of Mark joining the steering committee, hands up. Anyone opposed? All right, welcome, Mark.
Thank you.
I think you just doubled the steering committee.
They keep thinking the nominations are done, but they keep happening, so I asked the first time, are there 4 nominations? For the steering committee? Oh, you do. All right. Is this an annual thing or every month? Every month, unless we're at max capacity, which we are not. We have the.
What is max capacity?
All for each board, 24 in total.
We have a lot of numbers. I'm not in a.
Just said 24 combined though, right?
Yeah, 12 for each board.
Okay, thank you.
Great. We have trouble. All right, so then shifting on from there, we are a couple minutes ahead of schedule, but not too much. This would be the part of the meeting where we open the floor to, a candidate forum. So we have a handful of folks who are running for office here in the room. We don't have an order because we don't always know who's going to be attending, which of the candidates are gonna be able to make it. So I believe we have 3 people. I believe, I might be missing somebody. I think we have, Senator Ruth, Abby Duke and Miss, Aloisi. Am I saying it correctly? Okay, great. Am I missing anybody? Oh, hi, Martine. Okay, Martine is here. Okay, so we've got 4 folks.
14.
Thank you. Yeah, I think maybe for simplicity's sake, we'll just start over here and work our way around. And we've got about 30 minutes, so. Yeah, so, let's see, I can't do math on the spot. If we have 35 minutes divided by 4, what's that?
7.5 minutes. 8.
No,
Oh, yes, good point.
yeah, better than 8. 32 divided.
Okay. Okay, so why don't we say maybe like 4-ish, 3 to 4 minutes per candidate, and then the remainder of that 7-ish minutes will be questions. Does anybody have a strong disagreement or a different idea? Okay, and would you be willing to start us off?
Yeah, I'll be
Okay,
up there.
sounds good, because then, so you say we'll be able to see it. 3 to 4, yeah,
Well, I'm gonna put 4.
okay, and then 3 for questions? Okay,
Okay,
if you
so,
want this, you're welcome to it, but it may not be.
problem.
Okay.
hey, everybody, I'm Phil Baruth. I've been a Ward 4 resident for, I want to say 20+ years now. Used to live on Nottingham, and I've just last year moved to 145 Star Farm Road. So if you drive down right across from the undeveloped part next to the park, you'll see my little white house. So this is my end of my 14th year in the state senate. And in that time, we've redistricted. I used to represent all of Chittenden County for 12 years. Then we redistricted, and I now represent most of Burlington, Winooski, Essex Junction, some of Essex, some of Colchester. In my time in the legislature, I've worked on lots of different things, lots of different committees. Right now, I serve as the Senate President Pro Tem, and I've done that for the last 2 years. I also serve on the Appropriations Committee and the Judiciary Committee. And, my goals for going back are probably pretty familiar to you. Our ed finance system is teetering and needs major work. We had a spike in property taxes last year, larger than anyone remembers. And that had a lot to do with a huge spike in healthcare costs, 16% on average healthcare costs. So we had eventually a 13.8% average property tax rate increase around the state. My goal is to make sure that this session, we create some kind of stopgap authority for the state to make sure that we don't have that kind of spike again. It's not looking great for the coming year in terms of healthcare costs again. Related to this, and my colleague Martine is on the Health and Welfare Committee. She may know more about this, but our hospital system is not doing well and it needs a major overhaul. So education, finance, the healthcare system, specifically hospitals, but also health insurance and increases in premiums. I spent a lot of time talking with my new friend about housing. We are working like dogs on housing. And what I will say is if you go back the last 5 years, we've been able with huge government infusions of money, federal infusions of money, we've been able to invest about $1.5 billion in housing of all sorts. That's emergency housing, part-time shelters, affordable housing, missing middle, first-time homes. Every sector of the housing economy, we've pumped hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars into. So we've broken ground on 3 or 4 projects in Burlington, all across the state in major population areas. You're seeing these projects break ground and finish and invite new people in. So the housing crisis is not going to be over this year. It's not going to be over next year, but when we had the money, we poured it in. That is now working. I was talking to the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board folks today, and they were telling me about 4 new projects just this week that have broken ground around the state. So hopefully we've got enough underway. We'll continue to work on housing, but the goal is to make it affordable for first-time home buyers, but also for people who are renting. We don't want them priced out of their apartment, and we want them to be able to enter the housing. So I will be happy to answer questions. Is that how we're doing it?
Yes.
Do you want me to answer questions now, and then when I'm done, somebody else
I
introduces
was
themselves?
thinking right after each speaker, but if someone has a strong disagreement, we could do that.
I might as well since I'm here.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So when you were over here discussing the housing, one that did not, that I can recall, come up was rent control.
yes.
Now Bernie started rent control, correct? So do we, and those are the Cathedral Square, there are several of those.
Yep.
Is that going to be added on to? Because people sure love those.
It's part of the discussion, rent control and also just cause eviction. Because in Vermont, you can be evicted, and we also have the ability or disability, you can be fired from your job in Vermont for no reason, and you can be evicted from your apartment for no reason. So I've supported over the years and still do rent control of various kinds. So a project like Cathedral Square, they can create affordable housing permanently and hold the rents down. But I think it's a fair discussion. Should we be able to cap rents across the board? Because what we're seeing is, doesn't take a genius to figure that we've broken the economy. We've in many ways broken the climate. And when you put those two things together, we're getting huge amounts of climate refugees from elsewhere in the country, but also real estate companies that are expecting that our properties will be valuable to people who are in places that are too hot. They're in California, there are wildfires, they don't want to live there anymore. So we are seeing, because of climate change, a kind of silver lining that people want to live in Vermont, and we need the demographic shift. We need people to move here, but we want to make sure that companies don't come in advance, buy up all the property, and keep the prices sky high. So I'm engaged in those conversations through our Economic Development Committee. You'll be hearing more of that kind of thing, trying to protect against Airbnb, for instance, putting all of those rentals on the market for short-term rental, taking them away from people who would be able to live there. So in effect, our apartments become for tourists.
Thank you.
Yeah.
On school funding, can you address the concept that was raised by the candidate and Lieutenant Governor Zuckerman regarding moving healthcare costs out of the school budget to another agency?
Right, so, David and I have talked about this for years. In fact, we were on an education committee together a long time ago. What is being discussed here is over the years, schools have added certain functions because they had to, because they need to take care of their kids, they need to teach the kids, but the kid can't learn if they have tooth decay. The kid can't learn if they have mental health issues and behavioral problems. So over the years, schools have added in professionals to do these things. Some schools you can get dental work done in Vermont. I think it's all to the good, but what it means is somebody at some level has to pay for it. So if, let's take universal school meals, which we passed this past biennium. That's about 25 million a year. Let's say that we said food shouldn't be paid for by the schools. We're gonna have, the general fund budget paid for it. That comes out of your taxes, your Vermont state taxes. That would shift it to the property tax. So it leaves the property taxpayer. It's just gonna add it to the income. So that idea of moving things from the education fund to the general fund doesn't save anybody any money unless you're, you own property but have low income, then maybe it would help. But for the average person, it's gonna be a wash if we move things to the general fund. It's not to say we might not do it in some areas, but it doesn't save money. What we really need to do to save money is figure out, our educational system was built for 125,000 kids and growing. It's now about 73,000 and shrinking, and yet the establishment has never shrunk proportionally. So that's a question. All of those jobs are people just like us. That job is their livelihood. Their family depends on it. So how do you shrink that establishment without hurting schools, hurting kids, or hurting those families? So Martine knows this very well. It's a super complicated discussion, but we're considering all these things, including going to an income tax as opposed to a property tax, already income sensitized for many people, but not for higher income.
The other thing is,
I'm sorry to interrupt, we've actually gone a couple minutes past,
Okay.
but there is an attendee on Zoom with a question.
Oh.
I apologize, I forgot to invite folks online to, introduce themselves at the top of the meeting. And because somebody does have their hand raised, I'd like to give them the chance to ask a very short question and have to be really short.
Hello, can you hear me okay? Can you hear me okay? This is, can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great, okay, this is Alan Wagner, and I have a question about taxes, for Senator Baruth. And my understanding is that there were a couple of bills, passed out of, that went through the House. I think they were introduced by Representative Kornheiser. And they were both related to taxes on our wealthier Vermonters. And I've heard a couple of like vague references to these bills that they died in the Senate. In the Senate Finance Committee, I believe it was. But I wonder if you could speak to that and what's going on with those, because there was a lot of money that we had anticipated raising from those two tax bills, one of which is a tax on income of wealthier Vermonters, I think in excess of $500,000 a year income, and the other was a tax on unrealized capital gains. So what's going on with those bills? That would really, the amount of money that they were talking about would make
Al, we're
a
gonna
bit of a
cut you
dent.
off with the question. I apologize for shortening it. I think you had more to say, but we've already gone a bit over. So Phil, would you mind just summarizing?
Yeah.
One sentence, thank you.
Yeah, so the question was, the House passed a couple of bills that depended on a wealth tax. That is a tax paid by people $500,000 and above. Those three bills came to us. They did not move forward, and I will take some responsibility for that. The reason they didn't is because we were instituting a payroll tax for the childcare bill that we passed. That's a whole other thing, but it was an amazing addition to affordability measures for people with kids. And it's created thousands of slots around the state, but it's funded by a 0.4% payroll tax. That was going to come online in July. And as you all know, there was a big property tax spike, potentially 18%. I didn't think, in light of those, it was time to add another tax to the mix. But I will say that this year, I favor going forward with a stripped down version of the wealth tax directed at the homelessness issue. permanent shelters and low-income housing, so that we would create the possibility of perhaps a 1% tax on the 1%, fueling homes for people who have none.
I'm
And
gonna
I'll
ask
leave
you
it
to
there.
wrap it up.
That's it.
Perfect, thank you.
Yeah.
And thanks for that. I think this is a good problem that we have so many candidates and not enough time. So again, apologies for your cutting into your answer there. I want to make sure we have time to hear from everybody. So if we're moving in this direction, I think Missa, you would be next. Come on up and introduce yourself and then we'll have a few minutes for questions. I think the microphone is,
The wired microphone is working.
I think, oh, go for that if that works.
Hello. Sorry. I'm Missa Aloisi. I live in Ward 2, next to the number 2 fire station. I am a queer parent of a 7 and 11-year-olds who go to Integrated Arts Academy. My wife is a paraeducator at that school. And although we have higher needs in schools, we can't fill those paraeducation positions. There's currently 11 open positions at Integrated or in the school system. Because the pay is so low. The starting pay is under $20 an hour for a paraeducator, somewhere between $16 and $15 an hour. The bagel shop, you can make $25 an hour and not get kicked and spit on. So we need to fix that. I grew up on a farm in Western Massachusetts, a 2nd-generation farm. My grandfather was a worker on the farm and he bought it. My dad, it was a dairy farm. Vietnam War happened. My dad, and he actually enlisted. He was the last of the 4 boys on the farm. So the dairy farm shut down at that point. And then I moved to the farm when I was 5 years old and we boarded horses and continued the sugaring operation that's been there since 1905. I moved to Vermont in 2000 to pursue a career in architecture and worked for many firms in Montpelier and Burlington. The last one I worked for was French Freeman. They're doing the high school right now. And then 11 years ago, I started my own practice to really make architecture affordable and approachable to homeowners. And have a couple of clients in the room. And this past 5 years, I've never seen affordability kind of become such a big issue. But my clients are really struggling to do any sort of work. I have clients with accessibility needs who can't make their home accessible because of construction costs right now. So before Emma, your former rep, left the office, actually it was more than a year ago, last August, I started to work with Emma to get some homeowner protections going, and she presented a bill to at least get contractors registered. There's not even a registry of builders right now. So there's a lot more work to be done there in terms of how we can protect homeowners. We have it in the commercial world. We don't have it in the homeowner world. What else? Let's see. I'm a visual thinker. So as an architect, the way in which I kind of approach a problem may be a little bit different than a non-visual thinker. So I kind of look at things from all different angles. As an architect, I go into people's homes and I ask, what do you need and how can I help? And my job is to listen to what they need and present a solution that works for them. Not necessarily what I think is best, but what's going to work best for them. And I found a lot of value in that work and watching my clients kind of get their needs met in their homes. And I also work with, some commercial projects as well. Let's see. So I see, as a visual thinker, kind of go back to that. So when I approach a problem, I look at it a little bit differently, and I need to see a problem graphically. So I've created these policy panels on my website to kind of lay out. I know this is an introduction, but I'm going to take one more second, is to understand policy. When policy is so complex, like property tax, you can't engage with it. If you don't know how property tax is calculated, then you can't say, how do we fix this problem? Unless you understand how it's actually created. So I created these policy panels to really kind of break the barriers down so that way people can engage with policy. And if we can have people engage with policy, people will participate in the democracy more. And we can actually hear the voices that are kind of unheard right now. So,
Thank you. I want to pause you just to make sure that there's time for questions. So I want to open the floor if anybody has questions for Vanessa. Start there.
Oh, do you see any hope for joined townhouses rather than these big block buildings that look like human warehouses?
Oh, it's a zoning issue. So density, I mean, I am a big fan of Lancaster, Pennsylvania. I don't know if you've been there. There's like beautiful row houses and just the landscape of that architecture to me is just, it's stunning because there's, you live on your front porch. There's like these connected front porches and people, the community is really strong there because of the way the built architecture is. I would love to see when the Cambrian Rise happened in the beginning, there was some slated to have smaller units. There is a big missing kind of need for kind of that inroads to housing. So condominiums, row housing could be that kind of thing. I'd like to see that. I also, you know, think about land use and we want to make sure that we are making sure that things are dense too. So it's a give and take on what's possible. But I do think I was in one of the new buildings recently. And I'm walking down this 200-foot corridor with no windows. And as a woman, I felt really unsafe in it. There was absolutely no windows. And, you know, it's 200 feet long.
Like a jail.
Yeah, and thinking about architecture and mental health and wellness and providing spaces, there should be, you know, a courtyard. You should be able to see the outside and not feel trapped in a building. So we have to think about that too in the way in which we design our housing. Yeah.
How do you bridge the gap between folks who have housing and are trying to kind of optimize their housing experience versus folks who don't have housing? And I'm not talking about the homeless, I'm talking about like any 30-year-old or 20-year-old you talk to, and they're just trying to get a house. And I heard this framing recently where there's like a survival mode and then like a thriving mode. And a lot of the incongruency in talking about housing is there's people who are in thriving mode trying to talk to people who are in survival mode, and it's just not clicking. So seems like if you get those folks to click, then we'd have a shining future. So how do we do that? I'm trying to figure that out.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. I certainly wouldn't be able to afford my house and get a mortgage on my house right now. We bought it 13 years ago, off market. My wife was renting. It was a really unique situation. So we bought it for like tax price.
Those are the only ones.
Those
that
are very
work right
lucky,
now.
but so I'm really interested in like the conversation of like, how much profit do we need to make when we're selling houses? Everything's 30% higher. You can pay. I could never compete in this market because I don't have an extra $100,000 cash to throw out buying a house that the bank is not gonna say, give me a mortgage for it, so.
Do you have any things to wrap up on, or does that feel like a spot to end?
Nope, please check out my website, mista4vthouse.com, and on there you'll find there's a page for policy panels. I just released one on fair share. I'm glad that we're talking about that fair share wealth income tax. But I've done one on affordability, property tax, universal family paid leave, and gun safety. So, and I think you'll find them very informative.
Great.
Yeah.
Representative Fu?
Hi, everybody. My name's Abby Duke. Missa and I talked this morning and said, where? Okay. But, you know, I walked in and the first person I saw was Miss, and I was like, "Geez, we look good." So my name's Abby Duke. I live on Village Green, so Ward 7, right over here. I was appointed to the legislature in the spring, after our mayor resigned her seat. I was appointed by the governor. And I landed in Montpelier with a week to go in the session. So, it was a bit of a whirlwind, but I learned a lot. Had a couple weeks to decide, you know, do I see a path in the legislature where I think I can be effective? And I decided that I did. So I decided to run for the seat. For context, for those of you who don't look at electoral maps, Chittenden 17, which is the seat that Missa and I are running for, is the southern part of the new North End and the western part of the old North End. So if you're in Ward 7, it is from the Thayer Apartments, just north of, or just the edge of the, you know, like, shopping area south. And then it's Ethan Allen Parkway plus and south plus the Lopes Avenue neighborhoods. So just to help you for context. So I grew up in the Midwest. I moved to Vermont almost 30 years ago, thinking I was just staying for a year or two. It turns out, right? Turns out a lot of people have the story. It turns out Vermont is a really great place to live. So I settled in, I kicked around. I worked as a newspaper reporter. I worked as a field biologist technician, worked in marketing. And then I decided to kind of pursue my dream, which was to start a business. I wanted to grow produce in the Intervale and sell its end product. So I started my business called Sugar Snap Catering Company, with a little farm in the Intervale, which we still have. Originally, we had a storefront on Riverside Avenue, which is now Pismilo. But, you know, fast forward 21 years and we're, you know, for Vermont, decent sized full service catering company we're based in South Burlington. You know, I started the business from scratch. I learned everything. I learned how to do bookkeeping. I learned how to hire employees. I learned how to get permits. I learned how to make hundreds of sandwiches in short periods of time. I learned how to develop systems. Most importantly, I learned how to observe and learn, adapt, observe and learn, adapt, you know, just this constant iteration of learning and trying to do things better and better. You know, my business now is very stable and successful. I've got 7 year-round employees. All of them are paid well, get full benefits. The shortest tenure of that seven employees is 4 years. However, it was not a straight line to get there. It was really hard work. It was scary. It was difficult. We went through extended period challenges, financial challenges. And so standing here today with a successful business, it feels special to me and it feels really hard won, like we really worked for it. And when I look back 21 years ago, and I should add also in that time period, I had a civil union, I had 2 kids who are now at VHS, go Seahorses. They're on the soccer team, they won their playoff game today. Side note, okay, so while doing all of this, I'm raising kids and, you know, I learned so much about, what it takes to be an employer, what it takes to be a good employer, what it takes to grow a business. And now, you know, after 21 years of doing this, I'm ready. I feel really privileged to have the time and the ability to enter more into public service. And so I think I have something to add in the legislature to help with issues of economic development, to help with issues of housing, education funding. We have this myriad of interconnected issues. None of this is going to be easy. It's all going to take some really hard decisions and a lot of political will. And you know, I'm ready to go and do my best. To learn more about me, my website is abbyduke.com. And you can, my phone number and email address, everything is there. I'm happy to chat with anybody, answer any questions. And I can also answer some questions now.
I just want to say I love Sugar Snap.
Oh, yay. Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Abby, I think you guys have to on or ahead of schedule, so thanks for that.
Great.
There are for questions, so, okay, I would love to have.
I'm ready.
What's it like being a freshman?
What's it like being a freshman?
In other words, just dropping in there and being on the
Well-
very bottom of that.
So I wasn't a freshman, I was what they called number 150. They were like, more than one person would say, hey, we got a new 150. There's 150 legislators, so the 150 is the person at like, who was most recently appointed, was appointed, so. There's a club, apparently, there's a 150 club, they go out for dinner once a year. So, you know, it was why, it really felt like a gift, because I was plopped into this pretty intense situation where there's all these things going on, and nobody expected a thing of it. You know, they didn't. I could listen and observe and read. I would like sit in my seat and I'd have, while the session was going, and I had my map where all the legislators sit, and I had my iPad. So when someone would stand up and speak, I would look, who are they? And then I could read up on them and I could read about the bill. So,
What committees did you?
so I was on, and I hope to continue on commerce and economic development. Because and actually that was part of the reason I was interested in being on the list to be appointed, because I think that is a committee where I have value to add. Yeah, you have a question?
That's for
Oh,
today.
sorry.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay,
Yeah.
short question for answer.
Short question.
Yeah.
I can do it.
Rapid fire. What
Yeah.
is your information diet? And that means what do you read? Who do you know? Like knowledgeable experts
Gotcha.
that, you know.
Excellent question. Okay, I'm gonna try to answer this quickly. Every day I read the New York Times. I'm kind of an Ezra Klein junkie, so I listen to all of his podcasts, The Atlantic. Those are my core things, The Digger, you know, the local news. And then, you know, here's a beautiful thing about being in the catering business, is I've spent 20 years in rooms and meeting people, because, you know, somebody's got to provide the food at all these events. So it's actually been pretty cool. Like the number of people, it's like, especially I've become to realize how many people I know and how many experts I already know from being around as a caterer. So, you know, and going around and all the people I've been meeting in the district, I've been keeping a running list of experts that I can turn to and talk to. So it's a good question.
All right, I'll ask you to pause if there's any
Okay.
last thing you want to end on.
I think I'm good. I gave my website.
Great.
Thanks, everybody.
And then I'm having a brain fart. Please tell me if you are a senator or a representative.
Senator.
Thank you. Senator Good.
Yeah, I've been mistaken for a representative, but I'm a senator. Hi, everyone. I am Martine LaRock-Ulick. I am one of your state senators, and I want to thank everyone who supported me in the primary and who voted for me. If you didn't vote for me, thank you for voting, because as you all know, this is an incredibly critical time for us to engage in our democracy. I met today with one of my constituents at the Bagel. We had a great talk. I pride myself on my constituent work and my constituent outreach, so please don't hesitate to reach out to me and talk about, you name it. Today, we were talking about pharmacy benefit managers and private equity firms that are buying up healthcare in Vermont, as well as not pre-K, but childcare centers. So it's a problem, and I'm not exactly sure what to do about it, but we need to keep our eye on that. I am vice chair of Senate Education, and I am the clerk of the Health and Welfare Committee. So those are two areas that I have sort of been really involved in for the last couple of years. And I agree with what Senator Bruce said earlier. We do need to look at and dig into ed financing, but I would take it a step further. We need to look at the whole structure. We have issues in our education system that go beyond the financing piece. And I'm not going to go too deep into it right now because it's a lot of policy, but I would love to talk to you about it. I also think you can look at my website. I talk about my bio. I'm an Air Force kid who was born in Japan and went to kindergarten in Montreal and have been in Burlington for about 28 years. Mostly grew up in South Burlington, but anyway, it's all on there. And I guess I would love to answer questions because I do have a little bit. I have 2 years under my belt. I did pass some bills. I did some work. And you may have tuned in a little bit, but if there are questions, I'd be happy to answer them right now. Yes.
I wanted to ask a question, but I'm curious about the ongoing lawsuit related to the appointment of the education secretary. And I wonder if you could elaborate for us in the room who are following that. I think that, it's particularly problematic from a Democratic standpoint, and I appreciate the senators who have come forward to bring this lawsuit. So I'm just curious your opinion on it.
That's a great question. I'll give you a really brief explanation of how all of that went down. I was on, as I said before, I'm vice chair of Senate Education. So I was on the committee of jurisdiction that interviewed Zoe Saunders, who is our current interim Secretary of Education. I worked really hard to be very fair in my questioning. By the way, I was a high school teacher for 30-ish years. And I'm on the Burlington School Board. I just came from a finance and facilities meeting. And I spent all day yesterday in a school construction meeting in Montpelier. So I'm steeped in the policy of education as well as other areas. But I was really looking at her experience and her knowledge in the world of education. And I found it lacking. So I voted no, as did 18 of my colleagues. It had nothing to do with her political party. It had nothing to do with her previous work in charter schools. It was really experience and knowledge, and she didn't really have a lot. That said, I think she's working really hard right now, actually. I think she's doing some good systems work for us. But the bottom line is the Secretary of Ed is decided based on the advice and consent of the Senate. And we gave neither. And within 30 seconds of our decision, the governor placed her in as an interim. So the lawsuit really talks about the fact that interim is not defined in statute. It doesn't really exist. So why is she acting as a Secretary of Ed when she actually didn't get the advice and consent of the body that should be giving it? So that's what the lawsuit is. It was in a lower court. It got, they voted against the lawsuit there because of a Green Mountain Care Board precedent. And now it's going to the Supreme Court. Very good question. We'll see what happens. She will come up for another vote when we have a new Senate in place. So probably January or February. Yeah. Anybody else have any questions they'd like to ask? Sarah?
Not a question, but Senator Brooke left an opening around housing. And in particular, and I know you know this, but I'm just saying it, there's such a dearth of supportive housing and services. And since you sit on the Health and Welfare Committee, and I know you're a big advocate for housing, I just hope those concepts get married a little bit better. I didn't hear that discussion last year, and appreciate every cent the legislature put into housing, but we really need a focused look at supporting housing for folks who needs that are, we're not gonna fix it in a shelter, and they may not be ready for independent housing.
I agree. And I think you know too, that a lot of this is a workforce question, right? We don't have enough folks who want to do that really important work. Just as Mrs. said, we don't have enough instructional assistants in our schools. So it does come down to workforce and how do we bring people into the state? Well, it all comes back to housing, right? We talked about that earlier. I've been talking a lot with Councilor Barlow about regionalizing a lot of what we do. We've got to do that because getting back to the question of education and healthcare, it comes down to scale and capacity, right? We have tiny schools in Vermont that are graduating 19 kids. We have a system where, again, I'm trying not to be political, but we do have choice towns that are allowed to choose where they send their kids to school. And you might have a private school and a public school in a town. The public school's half empty. And our tax dollars are paying for that school because the choice districts are sending their kids to the private school. Again, it's about capacity, right? And it's about scale. And that all translates to money, ultimately. It's really important that we dig into all those issues. Yes.
And we're just about at time, so I'll ask it to be a really short question
Yeah.
and a really short answer.
Before I got here, I lived in Grafton and Windham counties. Grafton had like 640 residents. and it's very wealthy because of the Wyndham Foundation and all of that. And all the people that come to work in Grafton can't live in Grafton. And in Wyndham County, there's very, very little affordable housing anywhere. So it's not just us, but rural Vermont needs affordable housing too.
Absolutely. Thank you, Steve,
Yeah.
for bringing that up. I appreciate that. Any other questions?
I apologize, that even if there are, we have to end.
Okay.
here. But is there any last note you want to end on?
No, I just thank you everyone for being here. And please, again, don't hesitate to reach out. I will get back to you, I promise.
All right, thank you. So we have our last agenda item of the evening, which is a presentation from Burlington Electric Department. Before we begin that, there's just two quick things I want to make note of. One is a thank you to the People's Kitchen for providing dinner. And then the second thing is, just ask for, anyone who's able to stay for a few minutes after we end, just to help with cleanup. Any little bit of pitching in would be really appreciated, and many hands make light work. So thanks for that. And I will turn it over to Burlington Electric. And could you make your hand if you didn't sign in, I'll come over to you. Oh, okay, I'm so sorry.
Because we're gonna use the slides.
Hey, everybody. I'm Darren Springer, General Manager with Burlington Electric Department, also Ward 7 resident, and I'm joined by my colleague.
Good evening, I'm Emily Stebbins-Wheelock. I'm the CFO and Manager of Strategy and Innovation at Burlington Electric Department.
And we're going to spend a few minutes talking with you about ballot item 1 on your November ballot, which is the proposed net zero energy and grid reliability revenue bond. We've got just a couple of slides to walk through. We're glad to answer your questions. So we're going to start off with some bond basics that Emily's going to walk through.
Yeah, so we're going to start with just.
I can't hear you.
Okay, well, put this closer. Is that better?
Yes.
Okay. So starting with the essentials of what is the revenue bond and what does ballot question number 1 mean? A revenue bond is essentially a form of borrowing. It's a loan. So the ballot item is going to request the voters' permission for Burlington Electric to issue $20 million in revenue bonds, so essentially taking out a $20 million loan to be repaid from the revenues of the electric department, only from the revenues of the electric department. So this borrowing does not affect the city's debt rating. It is not repayable from property taxes. It does not affect the city's debt capacity or borrowing capacity. It requires an approval by a majority of Burlington voters. And it's a financing mechanism that Burlington Electric has used several times over the past decades, starting in the early 80s to finance the construction of McNeil Station. We used revenue bonds again in the early 90s to start up the energy efficiency utility in Burlington. We used them in 2014 to purchase Winooski 1, which is the hydro dam on the Winooski River, just by the bridge between Winooski and Burlington. And in 2022, we issued what we believed or planned to be the first of 2 $20 million tranches of funding to finance really investments in climate, in net zero energy and electrifying ground transportation and heating, and improving the grid and expanding our electric system's capacity to support that broader use of electricity. So this ballot question number 1 is really asking permission to issue financing for that second tranche of funding.
And we can go to the next slide. So just to level set where we are with the 2022 net zero energy revenue bond, the first 20 million that Emily mentioned, that was approved by voters, about 70% approval in December of 2021. It was the first of its kind in the country for a public utility to issue a bond focused on achieving a net zero energy goal with its community. And a big part of that bond and a big part of the current proposal is really about supporting electrification as we move away from fossil fuels, move towards electric vehicles, more heat pumps, more geothermal heating, electric lawnmowers, electric snow blowers, forklifts, transit buses, you name it. We want to be able to serve all of that new load with our grid. So the first bond is helping us move from 77 megawatt grid that we had at the time to an 80 megawatt grid. And just for kind of context, we peak in the summertime at about 65 megawatts. So we're creating a little bit of headroom there as we work on the current bond. We've spent through a bit over 12.5 million of the 20 million. We expect to spend through the rest of it somewhere at the end of this current fiscal year or maybe the beginning of the next fiscal year, which is why it's timely for us to bring this new proposal forward. Some of the really great things that we're able to do as well with the current bond, we're upgrading a number of our IT systems, which were very much out of date, so we can help with customers getting better information, more real-time information, better rate structures. We also are trying to lead by example with our own fleet. So we were able to purchase the first in Vermont all-electric bucket truck for our line crew. So as you see our orange line crew bucket trucks around the community, if you see the one that's white and green, that one's all electric. It's got a nice net zero logo on it. That was the first of its kind that was supported by the revenue bond. We also were able to convert some of our trucks and vehicles over to electric. And we also made investments in EV charging. We have the first modern fast charger in our network, was supported by this revenue bond. It's located at 585 Pine Street at our offices. There's another one that's going to be energized very, very soon downtown. And as well as we have chargers around the community like Oak Ledge Park, we supported with this bond, for example. So that's some of the work that we've been doing with the current bond. If we go to the next slide. So the new proposal is to continue this work. So we're talking about going from an 80 megawatt grid to now a 90 megawatt grid. And when we've done some analysis with our team, we think about how many folks in Burlington are eventually going to need electricity for transportation, for heating, more heat pumps, more EVs, et cetera. We think the grid eventually will probably be somewhere between 100 and 140 megawatts at the end state of all of that work. This bond will take us to 90 megawatts. So it'll give us even more headroom than we have today, support much more electrification. It's also going to support continuing the updates with our IT systems, some important investments at our renewable plants, including relicensing our hydro dam, the Winooski 1 hydro dam. And we're going to continue with the fleet conversion. This will support 12 new electric vehicles as part of Burlington Electric's fleet, including a second all-electric bucket truck, 10 new electric vehicles, and 1 electric forklift to replace a fossil fuel forklift. And then last but not least on this slide, which is out of date in a good way, we had up here that we were going to have 88 new EV chargers in the community. But you may have seen we were the only entity in the state of Vermont to receive almost $5 million in a competitive grant under the infrastructure bill that passed at the federal level to help with EV charging this last round. Emily did a lot of work on that as well as others on our team. So now we can actually support 200 new EV chargers in the community with the revenue bond, including 47 fast chargers, which is going to make it possible for folks to charge up really fast, 15, 20 minutes who are visiting the community. So that's good in terms of bringing in visitors, economic development, but also drop-down chargers that we have a pilot going for where we can use them on-street parking. So if folks don't have off-street parking, these are chargers that you can use in the community overnight, as well as our level 2 chargers like the ones we have at Hannaford. So we just have a couple more slides. I'm gonna hand it back to Emily and then we'll be glad to answer questions.
So this pie chart shows how we are planning to spend the funds from the revenue bond if it's approved. And then you can see from the big blue slice, just about 80% of it will go to fund capital investments in our distribution system. So that's poles, wires, switches, transformers, the infrastructure that delivers electrons around the city through the grid. About 9% will be invested in our generation facilities, primarily Winooski 1 and McNeil, and about 7% in our IT systems, as Darren mentioned, about 4% to the fleet EVs and other general plant needs, and a little bit in innovative programs around demand response and flexible load management. Next slide, please. So finally, let's talk about a couple things. What will be the impact on rates and what happens if the bond doesn't pass, and why is Burlington Electric asking for this financing mechanism as opposed to some other option? So the bond is really, as I said at the beginning, we're seeking to use it to finance our long-term capital plan, essentially from now till the end of the decade. The bond isn't passed, we'll have to make some tough decisions about what projects to invest in, You know, we'll have to make some cuts essentially, right? And the reason we're seeking to use this financing tool is it's very economic. Burlington Electric is rated by Moody's. We have our own credit rating. We're proud and glad to have an A3 credit rating from Moody's, which helps us get good interest rates on this debt. When we issued in 2022, we got a 3.5% total interest rate, which is really good. And if the bond ballot item is approved, there's no we don't need to run out and issue the next day. So we will take our time, we'll watch the interest rate environment. As probably many of you know, the interest rates are forecasted to keep falling over the next 12 to 18 months. So we will time it well as we can to take advantage of the more favorable rate environment next year. The slide up here with the different percentages is showing what would, all things being equal, looking at our budget, our projected budget for next year, how much would you have to raise rates maybe if you had the bond to help fund your capital plan versus if you didn't have the bond to help fund your capital plan and you still tried to do all the stuff you wanted to do as if you had the bond. So this is not a projection of what we're going to do with rates at all, but it shows that with the bond providing that capital injection, the rate pressure underlying is about 2%. And if you tried to do all the same stuff, make all the same investments, keep the same amount of cash in your rainy day fund, you'd be looking at about almost 13% of rate pressure. So it's, as I said, not a projection of rate changes. It's really just sort of show you why the bond is an economic way to finance capital investments. There's one more thing. Oh, in terms of how we're going to pay it back, that was it. So we have existing revenue bonds from prior borrowings that I mentioned at the beginning. Some of those are going to mature, one the end of this fiscal year, and then another in a couple more years, and another a few more years after that. So the idea is that the debt service associated with this new issuance will kind of be feathered in, and that our total debt service will remain essentially flat. So we'll be adding in new repayment as old bonds mature. And with that, we'd be happy to take any questions.
What does it mean to upgrade the grid from, say, 80 to 90 megawatts? What's being built?
Sure. So neither of us are engineers. With that caveat.
He's an engineer.
Lawyer.
Lawyer.
Yeah.
I thought you were an electrical engineer.
I'll let you keep thinking it, but no.
So we'll do our best, but generally speaking, it could be a number of things. Some of them are what the engineers on the crew call line upgrades. Some of it is what they call reconductoring. So taking down a skinny wire and putting up a fatter wire, for example, replacing switches and making them bigger.
I mean, but this drawing energy off of the big national grid you're talking about, right? And then also in distribution in the city is what we're
Yeah,
doing
so kind
both?
of two things, I think, in your question. One is the infrastructure that carries the electrons around. We're making that more robust so it can carry more electrons.
In distribution, you mean
Yes,
within the
that's
city?
distribution.
Within the city.
That's right. I think the second part of your question is, if you're taking in more energy,
Yeah.
where are you going to get it from?
But that's not what the bond is actually
It's
focused on.
not, so we're not
No.
taking in more energy.
Not yet, not yet.
We
But
will
you're
need to, but
increasing
we-
the capacity to.
It's a little bit of we're gonna build it and they're gonna come, Field of Dreams style. We're anticipating that we're gonna have more demand, and we're trying to stay ahead of it. Cause we don't ever wanna be at a
So
point where we can't serve that.
Internally, it's the distribution that you're trying to stay ahead of.
That's correct.
Okay, so we're like the lines that come in from McNeil that, by the Champlain Farms, like right where wards 4 and 7 end.
Mhm.
They're gonna get fatter. They're gonna be replaced and become,
It's kind of an example. We have a
Okay.
project list
all
that'll,
right,
you can look at, but yeah,
okay.
like we have a question back here and then.
I didn't understand how the revenue bond gets repaid and then the feathering in. I think I interpreted it wrong because it sounded like we're not taking this revenue to pay back the debt on the old ones. Correct?
No,
Cool, okay, so, so then, yeah, if it doesn't come from increased rate, you know, from 2 to 13, where's the money come from?
So in terms of the actual repayment of the bond, we're gonna try to structure the repayment so that as some of the debt we're currently paying for in our rate structure is coming off of our books, that this can be added, but the overall level stays flat. So it'd be like if you were paying off a home equity loan and then you took on an additional home equity loan after the one is paid off, for example, to do additional work, that kind of thing.
Makes sense.
Yep. Question here?
Two questions. First one, do you know, maybe you're not, because I'm not an engineer, what the kilowatt load is in Lakewood Estates, which is underground wiring?
I don't know the load for Lakewood Estates specifically.
Okay, because I mean, it's a neighborhood where there might be more and more EVs.
Yeah.
Second question is when people came out to quote rooftop solar for me, they were pressuring me to do it right now because Burlington is paying less for electricity put back in the grid than it did a year ago. Is that true? And what's the trend?
So that's interesting. So when we do, and I have solar on my roof, so I've been through this process too. I did it about 10 years ago. The process is called net metering. It's actually a state program. It's not a Burlington Electric program. So we don't decide what the rate is. The Public Utility Commission decides each year what the rate is when you sign up for solar, what your value stream is going to be. And so companies will sometimes take advantage of if there is something that's going to be changing, well, tax incentive or a Public Utility Commission rate, they'll try to tell you, hey, sign up now so you can lock in the best price, whatever that might be. But we're not actually changing anything in
Why would
Burlington.
it go down?
So the value of the net metering program started off at 20 cents a kilowatt hour.
And that
back in like 2010, 2011, 2012. Right. That's a lot higher than what we actually pay for renewable power. It was a subsidy to kind of get the industry going, get more people to do solar. As we've had more solar in Vermont, we had about 10 megawatts of solar in 2010. We have over 500 megawatts of solar in Vermont today, and our statewide grid at peaks around 1,000. So you're talking about a really significant amount that we've had. So as that happens, the Public Utility Commission's been lowering the rate because they've been able to demonstrate that even at a lower rate, people are still able to put solar on economically. There's also new federal tax credits too, that I think they figured into that equation. Yeah.
Maybe one more question and then we'll need to wrap up.
Quick question.
Please.
This is like a very, I could probably look this up online, but is the rates change throughout the day based on load? BED?
Not for BED. We generally have a static rate structure.
Yeah.
There is a time of use rate that people can sign up for if they want to. It's voluntary and we have those rates online. But for pretty much every residential customer, for example, everyone's paying a static rate no matter what they're using. There are programs we have like our electric vehicle rate where we're incentivizing you to charge during off-peak times. And part of the IT system upgrades we're talking about is so we can do more of those programs, like for heat pumps, for example. Yep.
I have one more question real quick. Is there anything in the budget to safeguard our electrical grid system from sort of outside shutting down the tax? I know McNeil was kind of doing that with their plant and kind of if we go all towards electric, we don't have a diverse energy source anymore. And so, you know, we're vulnerable in that regard. So I'm wondering about that kind of protection for grid, and if any of the money for energy bonding is going towards that.
I'd maybe just touch briefly on physical infrastructure. Maybe Emily touch briefly on if it's a cyber question, which I got a little bit of that too. In terms of physical infrastructure, we were just talking about Lakewood Estates underground lines. We have about 50% of our lines underground, which is helpful. So average Burlington customer sees about 1 outage a year, a duration of an hour or less. You know, rural Vermont, we see 2, 3, 4 days sometimes. So in rural Vermont, there are more folks getting batteries or have generators, things like that. Here, the reliability has been really strong. So we haven't had that type of scenario. Having the lines underground definitely helps us. Not all of our lines are underground though. The electricity is not a diverse source in of itself, but we do have diverse generation resources. So we've created a system where we can, what we call backfeed different parts of our grid. So what used to happen is when there was an outage, 2,000 to 3,000 people would be out and we'd have to go find the problem and then we'd have to fix it. Now we have an operator who can almost immediately get you know, maybe 2/3 of those customers right back online by backfeeding from another portion of the grid. And then we can isolate the problem and help the rest of the customers get back online. So we built in some pretty strong grid resiliency. I don't know if Emily, you want to offer anything on cybersecurity or?
Yeah, I mean, I won't say too much at a public meeting about utility cybersecurity, except to say that it's a really big deal. If you want to read scary stuff, you know, from the intelligence community, you can find it. And also to say that, you know, we're aware, right? We're being as aware as we can be and I think we're doing fairly well for a small, you know, muni utility without a ton of resources and people. We've recently added a dedicated cybersecurity engineer position, for example, in our IT department. We're seeking out federal training and grant opportunities to bring in sort of low cost or free resources in that area. We're networking with sort of, you know, the local FBI office, and we've made some national level contacts as well. So I think I'll leave it there, but yeah, we're trying to be as on it as we can. Good question.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. As people are wrapping up, the specific things we need help with are to put away the tables in the back, everyone except for the wrong ones, and put chairs away. And then I have a quick announcement about our next 2 meetings. Our November and December meetings are 1 week earlier than usual. So both of those will be the third Wednesday, so November 20th and December 18th. Thank you. Thank you.